All right, everyone. Thank you for joining the Silent So Loud podcast. We're glad that you're listening. We got a very special show today. We got a special guest. He's an author from Florida, from Tampa. His name is THAD DIAZ, and he has what's called the Cigar City series. So we're going to have him on here in a brief moment. Real quick, just want to talk fast baseball. The Chicago Cubs, they got Cody Bellinger signed. Yes, all know that you listen to the show that I'm a diehard Tampa Bay Rays fan, but I'm also a Chicago Cub fan, and they signed Cody Bellinger 3 years, $80 million. I think that he not quite the deal that he's looking for. He was looking more for like a long-term deal, but they gave him 3 years, $80 million. I think he can live on that. We can agree about that. Just glad that it's done. A little bit of a tough free agency, but they got the deal done. But like I said, we're not really here to talk about baseball today. We are here to have a guest on, and I am going to get him on the phone right now.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
You're,
How are you?
I'm doing good. You're on the Silent So Loud podcast, and if you want to tell everybody who you are and what you write,
My
you're
name is
on.
THAD. I'm a writer of hard-boiled detective fiction based here in Tampa, called
Nice,
Cigar City Case File.
nice, nice. Now, the power of social media. I kind of was just bored looking through Facebook, and you popped up in the news feed, and I haven't had a chance to read any of your books yet, but we do try to support Tampa people, Florida people. We've had on like Florida wrestler, a Tampa MMA fighter. So I thought you'd be cool to have on and talk about your books and just kind of tell us like what they're about.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. So I write books that, like I said, they're hard-boiled detective fiction. They take place here in Tampa. It's also kind of a unique take on a historically older trope, in that my main character is an active duty firefighter who does PI and bounty bail bonds work on his days off.
And
And
that's
so
that's Logan
yeah,
Walsh, correct?
yeah, Logan Wolf. That's right. That's his name.
Okay. And
And so, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, and so he's like an active character that just goes on throughout these whole series, like books one, two, three.
Yeah, I've got four books out right now.
Okay.
And yeah, he's the main character, and it revolves around him. It's actually told through I tell it through a first person narrative. So you literally are Logan Walsh through all of the stories.
Okay, so like how just curious, how'd you come up with this? Like is Logan Walsh kind of like a character that you thought of? Is it like a far separation from yourself, or is it kind of like I know you had I looked you up and you had a great career, and is it kind of like a spin-off of that, or how'd he come about?
So that's a good story. So I've been um, I'm a retired firefighter. I did 4 years in Pasco County. I did 21 years in Hillsborough, and I retired in 2021. But during that time, I was actually a writer. I wrote. I was also a writer, and I wrote some science fiction and some uh, fantasy as T. Allen Diaz. And one of those stories that I wrote was a first-person cyberpunk noir that takes place on the moon.
Okay.
And it's again it's similar, told to a first person. So I have a very I have a love of these types of stories. Well, years ago, I was working with a guy who made a casual comment about how he hoped we had a quiet night because he had to go run down a skip the next day. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, are you do bounty hunter work, bail bonds work on your days off? And he's like, oh yeah, I do that. I do some PI stuff. And I was like, wow, what a cool idea for a story because I was already a writer, you know.
Right.
And I'm like, what a cool idea for a story, but I didn't dare do it while I was active duty. I that's a good way to draw attention to yourself. Although I was a writer, they didn't seem to mind that, but they might have minded me writing gritty detective stories involving a PI firefighter. Then again, maybe they wouldn't.
Okay, so yeah, I mean that's interesting. So it just kind of like slowly piece itself together, and then now that you're away from that career, you can kind of just say, okay, now I'm like all in on this. Is that kind of like,
Absolutely.
yeah? Now
Mm-hmm.
the writing process. Are you one of these writers where like the famous ones? Like I've heard them talk about their different processes of writing. Are you someone that kind of like writes a little bit every day, or do you kind of like have time periods where you're not writing and then you just kind of spew it all out like from the thoughts, or how does that go for you?
So I take a very workman's attitude when it comes to working. Writing. I try. I'm not always successful. Today's a good example. I was not as success. I was not successful. I might get a couple hundred words before I go down tonight, but I usually write in the morning. So, and I was today. I get up at around. I get up between 4 and 5:30 in the morning. So,
Okay. Yeah.
and yeah. So I'm usually the first thing I do is try to check my emails. Any fans or readers or anybody who's written me, I try to respond to them first thing in the morning because my day gets hectic. Then try to get between. I usually try to get between 1 and 2,000 words, and I'm usually run about 1,500 words a day. I try to get that every single day, but I have business commitments, and today's a good example. I had a lot of, being an independent writer is a big business commitment. So I had a lot of stuff that I had to do. I had emails to write. I had books to deliver to stores that are. I'm actually now down at the Ybor Visitor Center. They're carrying my books, so I had to drive down to Ybor from. I live in Lakewood. I
Okay.
drove out there to do that. So there's a whole business side of this thing, but my daily work ethic is to write every single day, if,
Yeah,
if at all possible. I
that's
do
great
everything I
because
can to
like
write every day.
I mean, I've read like I got some notes from like the famous authors, and I was reading how Stephen King said if you're not writing about 1,000, 2,000 words a day, you're not going to get there. And
Yeah.
one of my favorite authors, Hemingway, I was read that he had a process like similar to yours. Like he said he would get up, early in the morning, 6 a.m., whatever, write for a while, but then he would, after he wrote for a couple hours, he would just stop writing because he felt like
Mhm.
that his brain was kind of getting like, a tad bit overused after a couple hours. So then he would just kind of shut it off, before like the afternoon hit. And that was like his peak time to just sit down and belt it out. So
Yeah.
I'm always curious of like how that happens. And when you write these books, do you write them? I mean, I don't know how much you want to give away, but do you write them like start to finish, or do you just kind of piece it together? Do you have like your top part of the book that you write first, and then like how does that go, or do you just write it straight out like start to finish?
I'm a start to finish guy. I will tell you that I absolutely believe that plotting out is the best way to do it, where you outline
Uh
and
huh.
you have a great idea, a great skeleton to work with. I I've tried to do that. I can do it to some extent, but I'm the kind of guy that I know where I start, I know where I finish. I got some ideas of some scenes that I want in between, and one of the things that I like to do is I see writing those cool scenes in between that I'm looking forward to. Uh, the reward for doing the work of the less exciting, if you will. I don't really think that's fair, but it's all important. But that those really maybe more mundane or character scenes that may not be quite as punchy. Um, those you gotta put the work in, write all of those, and then you get to write these cool scenes that you built up to.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's kind of a reward thing. I structure it that way. But that makes it sound like I don't enjoy writing those other scenes, which is not really true. But you do like writing the the action sequences or the aha moments much more than you do some of the other stuff. So,
Right.
I mean, there's, so yeah,
And are
that's
you
how I do it.
and are you like one of these authors, like, I've read where, people will write and they'll, like, I'm a big fan of Stallone, and I read like how he wrote his screenplays. And are do you kind of like write and then you'll start out like some way, but then the finished product is like just kind of like away from what you did, like just because you reread it and then you just kind of go, let me kind of tweak that, change that? Or is it kind of like, you get it on that like first run, like, okay, I got it all laid out and I don't have to like change this character too much?
So the, the most correct answer, at least as far as I'm for me, is I don't do a lot of like developmental changes
Mm-hmm.
after I get hit my stride. Typically, what happens is I will feel my way into the book. Like I said, I got an idea. I know where it starts, an idea where it finishes. I got some themes. I got some other things cooking and percolating, characters I want to play with and do stuff with, and I'll start writing. And sometimes, and this just happened. Um, I'll just say it happened in one of my books where I made a decision. Like initially, I had this theme that I really wanted to work with, and it never worked. I never figured out a way to make it work. I'd still go back to it if I could figure out a way to make it work, but I couldn't, and I didn't. I don't like contrived. Well, this happens because I want it to happen. So I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't come up with a way to address that directly. So I changed those themes very early on in the writing process,
Mm-hmm.
and I just went on ahead and I said, well, instead of this unlikable employer, we're going to have the exact opposite. This person's going to be great and witty and funny, and that's going to be the route that we go. And that's what I ended up doing, and it really worked. I think it. It does change, but usually early on. Like I'll get, you know, 10 or 15% of the way in the book and go, this is, I can't figure out a way. And then I'll go back and change the things that I need to change, and then I'll move forward, which is, again, a lot of the I don't do it the way a lot of people say you should do it, the textbook way, but it works for me.
Yeah,
So
and I
that's
believe
fine.
that, like any author, there cannot. This is just my opinion. There cannot be like a textbook way to write a book. What works for you as a writer may not work for the next person. So, I think that whatever you do to get that, finished product like pieced out, be it 40,000, 50,000, whatever words or whatever, like just do that technique, and
Yeah.
I believe too, like a lot of times, like these books that you hear like how long should it be for like a writer, and to me it's like however long the story takes to tell. If you can get that done in 200 pages, great. If it takes 500 pages, so be it too. Like whatever, you know what I mean. There's great books that are short. There's
Yep.
great books that are like long. So I
Yeah, the
just think
story is
that.
as long as the story is.
Right, right. Like just
Yep.
whatever you got to take to tell it. And so you've got the four books that you've written without giving too much away. This Logan Walsh character is he carrying it on? Like, is it going to go beyond this? Like, do you have like a fifth book that's going to kind of go that direction, or is that
So
giving too
I
much
don't
away?
think it's too much. No, I don't mind. I mean, it's a series. I have I have through book 9 sort of charted out, and I
Oh
actually
wow!
have written it down.
Oh
And
wow!
I'd like to, yeah. So I see this being a long. Like I'm a big fan of the Harry Bosch book, and
Okay,
I love if you're familiar with the Kinsey Gennaro series by Dennis Lehane. I
okay.
think that series is unfortunately that series is too short for my liking, but it's as long as it needs to be though. I don't think that they could have kept running that series indefinitely given the way that it worked. So, but yeah, I envision these books being a longer run. Um, I wouldn't mind seeing them hit 20, but I don't know that I've got. We'll see. I don't know if I got 20 in me, but
Now
right now I've got at least 9 and probably 10 or 11.
So you got a lot left in the tank with this.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
sure do.
that's awesome. So I mean, I was born in Tampa. I've lived here my whole life. So for that audience, because I got a lot of friends that listen, they're from Tampa, from Florida, wherever. Like, how much of Tampa are we talking about? Are they can really relate to this? Because the titles of your book, I'm reading them and I'm like, Tampa Heat, Gasparilla Job. Like, I mean, we can relate to all this, so like, I guess, like, how much of an influence was Tampa in your writing is what I'm trying to get at.
So Tampa's huge in my writing, and that is done absolutely uh, with that in the forefront of my mind. And I'll give you again a good example when you um, follow characters, and both of these guys, Dennis Lehane and Michael Connolly, they both bring their main characters to the Tampa Bay area for a short stint in a couple of their books, and one each, and and but they're usually in LA or Boston, and
Mm-hmm.
you read about these places, and you're like, oh wow, they go right into detail about. And I thought, about the setting, and I said, Tampa is such a cool place.
Oh yeah.
I really think that you could pull that off here. It's got a lot of old culture. It's got architecture. It's a happening place. It's got a lot of a lot of modern or a lot of brand new architecture, a lot of brand new developments always happening, and it's got a pretty dark past. I mean, we have a. I don't spend a lot of time on the mob. I'm going to be honest with you, but we've got a long history with the mob, a long history that goes hand in hand with that with corruption. I've personally worked. I didn't work for Tampa. I worked for Hillsborough County, but I've worked Tampa's streets, and I've seen the darker side of the city. So I'm like, man, this is you could really do some stuff with Tampa, and I've tried very hard to do that. I've tried to include in the setting the city is always right there in the story too. I think it really works, and a lot of my reviews come back either they're more local people will come back and say, man, this is I relate to this so much because it's
What?
it's so Tampa, right? So much
Yeah.
about Tampa.
That's
So
cool, man. I mean, that's original. I mean, like, how many times have we seen New York City or
right,
L.A.
or
or
in Miami,
Miami,
right,
right? Or
right,
Chicago,
right.
So almost to the point where, I mean, no disrespect to those cities, but it's just like that has just so been done so
Been done.
much, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So like it'd be no different if I saw like a movie that's shot here in Tampa. Like instantly, I'm gonna be interested in it. You wanna just see the scenery and say, oh, I know
Yep.
exactly where they're at, and that's cool.
Yep. And that's exactly, you know, I, I felt when I wrote these books, there were a couple things that I had in mind. The businessman in me, the artist in me, I'm born and raised here, and I love the idea of incorporating a little bit, not much, but a little thread of the fire department life in this. And I love the idea of setting this in Tampa, this city. But the businessman in me was like, well, it's a very unique take, and it's a very marketable uh, product to people who are from the area. And I've had great success. I've sold a lot of books I'm always at the Ybor Saturday Market, and
Yeah,
I do a lot of in-person events now, and people love this stuff. It's really working.
yeah,
I'm very excited.
that's great. Well, like I said, I wish you the best of luck. I think, like I said, we've never spoken before. The power of social media, it just grabbed my
Yep.
attention, and I said, man, I want to have him on this show. You know, much respect to you, and I hope the series just keeps going. And I wish you all the success, man. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate you having me.
All right, like I said, thanks for coming on. We appreciate you, and I'll talk to you later.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
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 All right, everyone. If you're looking for a rifle, a handgun, shotgun, some ammo, optics, eye, ear, body protection, all kinds of stuff, I want you to check out the Bunker Depot located in Sefton, Florida. Their address is 2004 South Parsons Avenue. The phone number is 813-816-2865. Check out the Bumper Depot located in Sefton, Florida. Educate, train, equip, and prepare community is a safe community, and they're just a great place to check out. And that's Bunker Depot. Tell them that the Silence So Loud podcast sent you. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We want to thank our special guest, the author, THAD DIAZ. He's got the Cigar City series books. You can get them on Amazon, Target. Check it out. Go to his site. Was a great guest. Appreciate him coming on. And now we're going to close with a little NASCAR talk, a little racing talk. We're 2 races deep. We had the Daytona 500. I know I picked Chase Elliott. He didn't quite get there, but he did have a good run. If you remember the race, stage 1, Hendrick had a great outcome. They finished out 1, 2, 3, and 5. All 4 drivers in the top 5. And William Byron got his Daytona 500, followed by Alex Bowman. So Hendrick had a strong showing at Daytona. And then yesterday, the drivers went to Atlanta. Atlanta had a great race. Daniel Suarez won that race. It was a 3-car finish race. I don't know if you saw it or not, but they had a 3-car finish. Daniel Suarez won by 0.003 seconds. 0.003 seconds. I don't even know how you measure it. At the end of the race, I wasn't quite sure who won. All 3 cars just crossed the finish line at the same time, and it was just fantastic. You had all kinds of cautions in that race, and it was getting frustrating, but at the end, it was definitely like a cool finish. You had Daniel Suarez, and then Blaney was right there, and then, of course, Kyle Busch was right there, and it was just hard to tell. So we're 2 races deep. Way too early to see who the strong ones are, but like I said, Hendrick had a strong showing, and Atlanta was a rough race to watch. So many cautions. I guess they were having issues with track conditions, but I think, in my opinion, that the finish made up for it. And once again, we're excited that NASCAR is going. We have no football right now, but that's okay because baseball is going to pick up here, and we're excited about that. And once again, I want to thank all of you for listening. Those who are out there listening to the show, we appreciate it. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for listening to the Silence So Loud podcast.